WEFUNK. We funk.
As I guess, we will get to the number one WTF moment in the history of boxing. But beware, animals bite. Tyson Holyfield 2. And I guess first, I suppose we'd have to set up Holyfield. I guess first, I guess we'd have to set up Tyson Holyfield 1. November 9th, 1996, the MGM in Vegas. A true heavyweight mega fight between two of the great American heavyweights of all time. However, as always is the case, seemingly as always is the case in boxing, this fight happening about 5 years too late. And by 1996, we are 12 years removed from the 1984 Olympic team, of course, in which Mike Tyson and Evander Holyfield were teammates, where I guess Evander, the real deal Holyfield, made the Olympic roster, while, of course, Kid Dynamite did not go on to actually compete for America in the Olympics. After the two were, teammates on the alternate team or whatever, but as well. However, we're 10 years removed since Mike Tyson was truly viewed as the baddest man on the planet, 6 years after his loss to Buster Douglas, and a year and a half after he was released from prison after serving 3 years of his 6-year sentence, of course. And a couple of wins against jobbers and a big decision not to fight Lennox Lewis would bring us to the MGM for Tyson Holyfield 1 in 1996. And at this point, I guess as well, you'd kind of, just for the general context of Mike Tyson's career, but he's really at the real pendulum of this act number 2 of Tyson's career, where, of course, the first act was, the greatest puncher of all time, the most feared fighter, the cultural phenom, the worldwide sensation that was Iron Mike Tyson. It was a thrill ride smash. And then, of course, it all came crashing down, like I mentioned, with his, prison sentence, and definitely put a halt to his career, but as well, of course, his public image. But as we led up to Holyfield 1, it would truly be a second chance for a second act. And what would that become? Would it be another amazing streak of knockouts? Would it be retribution to his name and more heroics to his legacy? Or would it become the classic tragedy that we all know and love? But as we entered the MGM arena in Vegas, like I mentioned, on the night of Holyfield Tyson 1, that was still very much to be determined, and there was still the potential to be the greatest of all time on the table for Iron Mike if he could knock out Evander Holyfield and continue and finish off his career with more highlight wins against great 90s heavyweights like Lennox Lewis and all the other great fighters of the era. But so a lot on the line in a lot more ways than one for Tyson on the night of Tyson Holyfield 1. And all in all, a real solid, class fight. I guess ultimately the story, but Holyfield really the first guy ever to stand toe-to-toe with Tyson and really be stronger than him and not afraid of him and, look him in the eye and trade punches. Ultimately scores the epic 10th round TKO of Iron Mike and gets the W. However, the fight was not without some controversy, as Mike was affected by several headbutts throughout the fight that were ruled accidental. However, Mike's camp was furious about just the sheer number of headbutts as well as their intentions. All right, so take us to Holyfield Tyson 2 at the MGM 7 months later in June of '97. Where a big pre-fight storyline was all of the headbutts and even a referee replacement. That I wonder if that's going to come up. I wonder if that's going to play a factor. But a big referee change on the demand of Mike Tyson's camp, as Mitch Halpern, the referee from the first fight that allowed the headbutts, was removed as the referee, and of course the hilarious Judge Mills Lane was appointed as the replacement ref. All right, really at the recommendation and influence of the Tyson camp was Judge Mills Lane, as with some skepticism, I'd say, from the Holyfield camp. All right, and again, I wonder if this is going to come up as a storyline, but I guess. However, the real storyline of the fight was now the career officially in the balance of Iron Mike, who since his release from incarceration, we've seen him obviously aged and deteriorate, and now we've seen him take a loss to Evander Holyfield. And I guess I did refer to it earlier, but we all know what happens in the end for Mike Tyson. All the madness, all the insanity, the Zoloft, the face tats, the shell of his former self, an ex-champion turned into a sideshow freak. Well, it all started right before our very eyes in the third round of Holyfield Tyson 2. Because at that time, still very possible for Mike to avenge that previous loss, KO Holyfield, go on to unify with Lewis, and continue that second act of his career that's still on the table in this rematch. But perhaps Tyson knew the real truth. He was no longer Kid Dynamite or even Iron Mike. He was old and in debt and overmatched, as well as enraged by yet another accidental headbutt that bust him wide open early in the second round of Holyfield Tyson 2. As I'm taking you right to the action, as it actually started off, pretty furious fight. Tyson comes out early in this fight with a lot of aggression and desperation, you know what I mean? Definitely the OG Tyson storming out of the corner, and, early on in this fight anyway, you saw some glimpses of the best Tyson you could possibly see by this point in the late 90s. But like I mentioned, yet another headbutt ruled accidental by Judge Mills Lane now, like I mentioned in the second round. Really busted Mike up. And as he came out of the corner in the third round without his mouthpiece, you didn't really think much of it at the time. But towards the end of the round, Evander got Mike in a clinch, which was really one of the strategies for Evander in this fight, like I mentioned. Evander, by this point in Tyson's career, Evander was the bigger and stronger guy, and really, in a lot of ways, physically bullied in this fight. And he would get Tyson close, and he would start clinching, and really just win a wrestling match versus Tyson to kind of thwart off Tyson's offense. And in the process, he would duck his head head, and that's where a lot of these headbutts were coming from. All right, and I guess out of frustration in the fact that Evander had figured him out, as well in the reality that Evander was not only the better boxer, but he was the bigger man, and at this point in their lives, he was the tougher SOB. The wounded, scared animal strikes back, and if you can't beat him, you bite off part of his ear. As Tyson spits out the mouthpiece and takes a bite of Evander Holyfield's ear. As Evander Holyfield starts jumping around, when you're watching the replay, Evander Holyfield starts jumping around and screaming his pain, and you can't really put together what happened. He starts pointing his ear. You literally see on the camera, on an extreme close-up, a piece of Holyfield's ear missing. All right, they send him to the corner where Judge Mills Lane is about to DQ the fight when the medical, the Las Vegas Commission and ringside doctors step in. The doctor assesses Evander Holyfield can continue, which is where a lot of the Don King promotions and shadiness around the whole Mills Lane appointment came in. Obviously, the referee was in the pocket of Don King's promotions because Mills Lane was about to call the fight off. The guy that they appointed as the referee was about to call it off. That overturned by the, like I said, ringside doctor and probably more importantly, Las Vegas boxing commissioner. All right. So shockingly enough, despite a part of his ear being bit off, the fight goes on to continue. All right. For another 20 seconds later, until of course Tyson takes another bite of the ear. This time his left ear. This one goes unseen as right at the time Holyfield starts jumping around again in pain and pointing to the ear. And when you're watching it, looking for it, you can see that it happened. But Evander Holyfield, and just talk about really manning up, Evander Holyfield, after getting bit in his ear, knowing this guy, this maniac, is out to bite his ear off, puts his head down and just goes straight at him, continues another clinch, and fights Tyson off for the end, for the rest of the third round. All right, now it's really where the confusion starts, where in the corner break between the third and what would be the fourth round, Lennox Lewis's camp really appeals to Judge Mills Lane that he's now been bit and is now bleeding from his second ear, and at this point you just really have no idea what this maniac's gonna do, and you cannot let this fight continue. Judge Mills Lane disqualifies Tyson and stops the fight at the end of the third round, which is where really a lot more mayhem started, as when Tyson is informed about this, goes on a complete rampage, as well, I guess, the first time he bit Holyfield, when Holyfield turned around and started yapping, Tyson pushes him from the back, and almost starts an all-out brawl. Then he kind of gets restrained, doesn't get disqualified, they continue on the fight. When Tyson's informed of the disqualification, goes on an all-out rampage, tries to attack Holyfield, and Holyfield's corner gets restrained by his camp. A lot of cops come in. Tyson is pushing cops, and honestly, when you look back, he is very lucky that I'm sure, because he honestly was very close. And at this point in 1997, in a pre-Kaepernick world, we'll just say, but it's a different story, and you would not have been surprised if Tyson started knocking out cops and got himself shot in the middle of the ring, or at least tased, I guess, in the 90s. But just really, just what turns into an absolute crazy situation as more of a Mayweather Judah family style brawl than a Bo Galata, where it doesn't really spill into all out mayhem. However, Mike Tyson is totally out of control, and at this point, we have seen the spectrum from him being, as the heavyweight champion, the scariest, most feared man alive, turned into a convicted rapist, and now he is an absolute wild animal on the loose in his biggest chance for retribution. And as you watched it unfold, you really knew it was over for Mike, as he went on to attack. He was attacking fans as he needed to be ushered out by like 15 people. He goes on some crazy rampage. He goes on some crazy rant to poor Jim Gray in the post-fight. And like I said, it was pretty much it for all intents and purposes for Iron Mike on that night in the summer of '97, as he would go on, despite wins for Botha and Severese. Everyone, including Mike, knew he didn't really have a chance, as he ultimately did have to fight Lennox Lewis due to sheer bills owed from the bills owed department. I'll go get my ass kicked by Lennox Lewis. I'll go get my ass kicked by Lennox Lewis in 2002. But he really never recovered in the ring, and definitely in the people's opinion, as like I said, Mike Tyson would go on to finish his career in the total freak show factor and failed drug tests for weed, where he literally lost the fight to Galata, actually. Hilariously enough, the classic Tyson Galata officially went from Tyson win to no contest decision after he failed a cannabis drug test. Right. He officially did have a no mas of his own, as well as a lot more antisocial behavior. And that would really forever go on to define Mike Tyson. I guess that is until the great Act 3 and Mike Tyson's post-boxing life and his spiritual breakthrough. And Mike Tyson is really now self-reflective and super genuine, and he's as wise as the old owl. And you can, in all honesty, learn a lot from Mike Tyson and about failures and about mistakes and errors in your life and holding yourself accountable for all that kind of stuff, and really go on to turn your public opinion from, like I said, at Mike Tyson's height of popularity, he was already the scariest man in the world. And then, like I said, through various, legal troubles or not, like I mentioned earlier, Mike Tyson, by his own admission, was a very, very unsavory person for most of his, for pretty much all of the, fame part of Tyson's career. And then he was really just a total laughingstock and freak show by the, mid-2000s. However, by 2020, he's definitely turned it around and he's almost like Snoop Dogg. And he's just a beloved pop culture figure that'll star in The Hangover and go on talk shows with Martha Stewart, and actually has a lot of mainstream popularity and appreciation for Mike Tyson, which you would have thought was impossible on that summer's eve of 1997, I guess. In terms of the headbutts and the bite and everything itself, at times and for years after, Mike claimed that it was straight up in retaliation for the headbutts. Evander, on the other hand, and a lot of people in the boxing world believe that Mike simply knew he was not going to get a W and wanted a way out and took the disqualification rather than the impending knockout. Right. And instead he decided to play into the whole crazed animal thing. Watching it again, on YouTube for purposes of the show and all, and just out of the fun of the history of boxing, as we're all, stuck inside of our house all day, every day. You watch it, and especially knowing what you know now about Tyson and the whole situation and how it really ultimately all plays out, with hindsight being 2020 and all, I really do feel that it was just an absolute mental breaking point and Mike Tyson really snapped, where, like I mentioned, he was not self-reflective enough at this point to know it, but really his heart was not in the competition, and I believe that, like I mentioned, his mind, I believe he did know that he was no longer feared, and he was looking into the eyes of Evander Holyfield, who was not scared of him, and like I said, was bigger than him and was better than him. And I don't think that he was necessarily a coward and looking for a way out and taking a disqualification. I just feel that that was the first time in Mike Tyson's life that he had ever experienced that, and he didn't know how to handle it, so he lost his mind and not only bit somebody's ear off, but then went on a true crazed rampage afterwards. And when you watch that rampage, that's not him playing into a crazed animal thing. That's an absolute crazed animal just going nuts. And he has no control over himself or his actions at that time. And when you look at the grand history of Mike Tyson, that kind of tracks, So it's not a far stretch that this would go down for Mike Tyson to lose it. We're not exactly, this isn't Roberto Duran and the No Mas situation, all right? So Mike Tyson losing it in general, I guess, isn't the most shocking thing, but the scale of which he lost it and the very public nature it went down in what could have been, George Foreman. Part of boxing, really, Evander Holyfield even, but part of boxing is, great moments at later eras of your career, and Mike Tyson had his opportunity, and instead of seizing the day, he bit Evander Holyfield's ear off, and like I mentioned, he would continue his career due to economic constraints. But I guess at the time of the incident, his license revoked permanently, as well as he was fined $3 million by the Nevada State Athletic Commission. Of course, his license would ultimately get reinstated, and he would go on to fight again. But for generations of fight fans who have only read about Kid Dynamite and have only seen highlights of Iron Mike, the greatness of the 80s would be overshadowed by the insanity of the 90s and the number one moment here on Big LW's KO Cast.
Big F! WEFUNK. We funk.